Times used to be that if you didn't feel well, you went to your family doctor and he treated you. Nowadays, if you have a stomach ache and you go to your family doctor, he or she is very likely to refer you to a gastrologist or some other type of ologist, a specialist, to help you to feel better. And that's not altogether bad. I know it's another copay for the insurance and all the other stuff that goes along with it. But when all you do is one thing, when a doctor only handles one type of case, they tend to get pretty good at it. That's true of stores as well. We live in a day and a time of the specialty store. Even Walmart has started opening specialty stores. They got the neighborhood markets that just have the groceries and everything. Walmart To Go, which is kind of sort of a convenience store with just convenience store stuff and gas pumps and everything. And then they got the pickup thing that you can go and call ahead or order online, and they have everything ready for you. All you got to do is drive up, they load it in your car, you pay for it, and off you go. Pretty impressive. But if in times past, if you wanted to get, say, pet supplies, you would go to the grocery store and they'd have an aisle of pet supplies, wouldn't they? And that's where you would get it. Now there's stores like Petco and PetSmart. If you wanted building supplies or hardware, most of the time a grocery store would have a pretty good selection of things in times past. But now you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or any of the other smaller hardware stores around. This is true not only of stores, but really of most everything in life. We've become a specialized society. And if you don't want to leave your house, you can go to a specialty store that isn't even a real store. It's a virtual store that you go and you visit online on your computer, and you give them your credit card information or debit card information, and they ship it right to your house and you don't have to leave. It's pretty exciting. My favorite type of specialty store has to be ice cream stores. Don't look at my belly, okay? Probably best that you not order their products online, but anyway, they do such a good job of making so many special treats. And I'm not talking about, the Dairy Queen or Sonic type things where their idea of ice cream is something that comes out of a metal machine that you pull the handle on. There's a place for soft serve. I'm not dissing it or anything. But I'm talking about places like Brahms. And the ice cream isn't the only thing on the menu at Brahms, but they got to reach down in that cooler and scoop it out of a carton and everything and all, and not just pull a handle, or a Marble Slab Creamery, which you probably don't know what that is because the nearest one to Siloam Springs is in Conway or Oklahoma City. But good place to go, and I'll tell you more about it in a moment. Or Cold Stone Creamery. Marble Slab is kind of the same as that. In Cold Stone, there's one in Springdale and there's one in Rogers. A few years ago, around Christmas, we were in San Antonio, and my parents decided that they were going to take all of us. There were 17 in the family at the time. Now there's 20, but 17 of us at the time. They wanted to take us for a treat. They wanted to take the grandkids, but the kids had to go too because Doc and Grammy don't have enough car seats in their car, and they don't have enough room. So anyway, we went to Marble Slab Creamery, I believe it was, and I was amazed at the incredible number of combinations and flavors of ice cream that they had. You never heard of such things. Some of the more memorable names were things like Fabulous Fudge Truffle. Ooh, sounds good. Apricot Brandy Yogurt, Peanut Butter, Bubble Gum. Not together. That's two different types, just so you know. Fudge Ripple, Banana Nut, on and on, dozens of others. And then what they do at Marble Slab, the reason it's called Marble Slab is every store has a marble slab. And they put the ice cream on top of the marble slab, and they'll mix in whatever topping that you want into your ice cream. And I mean, they have, you name it, they've got it for a topping, okay? It just, the combinations are endless. It boggles the mind and tantalizes the taste buds just to think about it. Now, can you imagine anybody walking into a place like that and ordering vanilla? I mean, you can get vanilla anywhere, okay? You can go to the grocery store and get vanilla ice cream. This is what we would call a connoisseur's ice cream store. You don't order just plain vanilla in a place like that, unless your name is Rachel Dye. I still remember, even though it was 12 or 14 years ago, I still remember the wide-eyed looks of shock that she got when she said in her little 3 or 4-year-old voice, "I'd like vanilla with sprinkles." And that was just the look she got from my family. I mean, it was just, get on with the exciting, exotic flavors or get out, But life is like that. Life is full of exotic, fantastic things to see, to learn, and to do. There are things to enjoy, to play with. There are challenges and opportunities. There are goals to reach and people to love. It's a wide, wonderful world out there. Yet many people step up to the counter and say, "Give me a half a gallon of bland. Give me a double dip of mediocre. Give me a cheap, boring sundae covered with blah." I don't believe that that's the type of life that God calls us to. I believe that God calls us to an exciting life, a life that is filled with many, many, many good things. Let me share with you some Old Testament examples of this principle. And the first one that came to my mind is Caleb. You remember Caleb, don't you, from the Old Testament? He was one of the 2 faithful spies that Moses sent out. He was one of the 2. Remember, Moses sent 12 spies to spy out Canaan as the Israelites were coming up out of Egypt. 10 of the spies said, "Oh, no, we can't do this. They're too big, they're too strong, they're too powerful." And so they convinced the people that they couldn't do it. And you know what? Those 10 spies, they were exactly right. The Israelites could not take Canaan. But Joshua and Caleb were even more right because they knew that God could. Okay, and so Caleb was one of 2 who were faithful spies, and he was one of 2 adults at the time of the spies that was able to enter the promised land. And that was with Joshua, the other faithful spy. Moving forward in time, the Israelites have pretty well conquered the land of Canaan. And in Joshua chapter 14, verses 10 through 12, we read these words. This is Caleb speaking, by the way. "Now then, just as the Lord has promised, He has kept me alive for 45 years since the time He said this to Moses while Israel moved about in the desert. So here I am today, 85 years old. I'm still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go into battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified, but the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as He said." Put simply, what Caleb told Joshua was, you know what? I'm 85, but I can still whip those giants. God and I can handle it. And so let me have that hill country that was promised to me. That's the place that they spied out that the other 10 were so afraid of. Caleb says, that was 45 years ago, but I still want it. And I'm still willing to go out and get it. To have that zest and zeal and energy and faith like that. To believe, to challenge and act like that into old age, that would be great. No vanilla for Caleb. Caleb wanted all the things that life had to offer. Another good example that you might be familiar with is David. In Psalm 118, verse 24, David wrote some pretty powerful words. He said, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." What a wonderful outlook on life. What a wonderful way to greet each day. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And for the most part, David lived like this. Now, sure, David occasionally slipped up. A big one is Bathsheba, that a lot of middle-aged men have fallen into that trap, made that mistake and everything. But he regained his step and he continued on in the adventure of life. And as a result of that, in Acts chapter 13, verse 22, it says, "After removing Saul, he made David their king. He testified concerning him, 'I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do.'" This is Paul's sermon while in Pisidian Antioch. Clearly, God approved of David. Not everything that David did, okay, because David wasn't perfect. He had his mistakes. We talked about that a little bit. But David's outlook on life, David's his desire to do those things which pleased God and to live that full life that God had called him to. Another Old Testament example that maybe you wouldn't come to mind if you thought about it is the prophet Jeremiah. In Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 6 through 10, God has called Jeremiah to be a prophet, to be his voice. And he says, "Ah, sovereign Lord," I said, "I do not know how to speak. I am only a child." But the Lord said to me, "Do not say I am only a child. You must go to everyone I send you and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord." Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth. And he said to me, "Now I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant." Jeremiah is young at this time. And understandably, he's a little bit leery about this whole being a prophet thing, especially knowing how various kings had treated prophets, which was not as they should have been treated. But then later in the story of Jeremiah, in Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 9, Jeremiah says, "But if I say I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot." Jeremiah went from not knowing what to say and being so terrified of speaking up to saying, "You know what? If I don't speak up, his word is like a fire in me." That's the type of zest and that's the type of zeal that God calls us to. But the Old Testament doesn't have a monopoly on good examples of this type of a life. The New Testament has some examples as well. One very big and good example, I think. Jesus was not a mediocre man. He wasn't. His life didn't peak and then level off and start to go downhill. It didn't work that way. Jesus, in fact, says in John chapter 10, verse 10, "I have come that they might have life and have it to the full." Some translations say have abundant life, or have life more abundantly. The bottom line is that Jesus doesn't want us to settle for a mediocre life. He doesn't want us to settle for blah. He doesn't want us to go around just barely scraping by. He calls us to a full, abundant life. More than calling us, He came and to earth, He lived and He died so that we could have a full, abundant life. Paul, just look at Paul's writings, okay? Some of the things that he wrote. 1 Thessalonians 5:16, he says, "Be joyful always." Be joyful always. Well, Paul was an apostle. I mean, he was able to do miracles and everything. And I mean, why would he ever be tempted to, I don't know, not be joyful? Well, let's see. He was imprisoned. He was beaten. He was stoned. He had people constantly arguing with him. People trying to hurt him, imprisoning him, and trying to kill him. So no. Paul didn't know nothing about sorrow and heartache, did he? And yet, he still says, be joyful always. And then you look at Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. He says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. If the Spirit is living in us, then the Spirit is going to bear His fruit in our lives. And His fruit is going to be love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16, he says, therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. This is probably my favorite verse and the greatest verse on this type of lifestyle, in my opinion, is to understand that outwardly things may be crumbling, but inside we're being renewed every day. And that spills over into the way that we live our lives. But knowing this, and despite knowing all of this, many of us are what we might call old at 33. You see, age, depression, and boredom are more of an attitude than a circumstance. What does it mean to be old at 33? It means that the twinkle is gone. You've lost the wonder. You've become predictable. Romance is gone. There's nothing new in you. Therefore, the flavor has gone, and all you're left with is vanilla. By the mid-30s, most people have stopped acquiring skills and attitudes. In theory, anyway. In theory, anyway, you are, quote unquote, set in your ways, or so to speak. And all that remains is to just push the corpse into the grave. Cavett Robert once said, Lord, don't let me die until I'm dead. And that's the type of attitude. We don't want to die until we're dead. We want to live all that time. So how can we go about doing this? We looked at some Old Testament examples, some New Testament examples. What about some modern execution of this idea, of this lifestyle? Well, we all need to restore enthusiasm to our soul. In fact, the very word enthusiasm is an exciting word, okay? It actually comes from two Greek words that were sort of smushed together, okay? And the two Greek words mean literally God in you, or full of God. Nothing wrong with that, is it? To be enthusiastic means that God is in you, that you are full of God. The person who is full of God is going to be alive, vibrant, and radiant. You know, we could stand a huge dose of enthusiasm in our world today. So many times, the only thing we hear about is bad things. Things that are wrong with the world. I mean, you turn on the evening news and there's never anything good on the evening news. And we think everything is so bad. And that sort of has carried over into church, where a lot of the time we think, well, requesting prayers, that's just for if you've done something wrong, if you've been bad. You have to go forward, and it's almost a walk of shame to respond. I don't think so. I think if something joyful is happening in your life and you want to share it with your brothers and sisters, there's no better time to do that than at the invitation. To say, I don't want to request prayers of sorrow or of forgiveness, but prayers of thanksgiving, prayers of joy. I said that one time in a place where I was preaching. And we had some people respond that were an older couple, both a widow and a widower, who wanted to announce their engagement. And that was exciting and that was wonderful. But do you know we still had some people tell me, I think that was so inappropriate. What? This is exciting. This is good stuff. This is exciting life. And we need to understand that, and we need to celebrate. We need to rejoice with those who rejoice. We need to mourn with those who mourn. But anyway, the point is, let's leave all the bad stuff outside. And let's celebrate things and be excited and have a little bit of enthusiasm. We need to also maybe break the mold of predictability. And I'm not just talking to the quote-unquote old fogies, okay? We always think of the old fogies as the ones that are so predictable and everything. Every age group needs to understand this, okay? Even the way we dress can be predictable. I venture to say that most people get dressed pretty much the same way every morning. When you put on pants, you probably put the same leg in first all the time. When you put on a shirt, maybe the same arm goes in every time first. And everything. And, it's a very predictable. Nothing wrong with that, okay? Nothing wrong with that at all. It's not what I'm saying. But you probably wear the same style of clothing or colors. You probably subscribe to that old theory. You don't wear white before Memorial Day or after Labor Day. So, yeah, you don't. You're not supposed to do that. Well, watch the PGA Tour for some time. They wear white all the time in their pants, and it looks good, okay? Anyway, point is, even in our clothing, we can become predictable. You probably drive to work by the same route every day. Well, yeah, I figured out the shortest way to get there. Okay, that's good. But you probably approach problems the same way. Even your marriage can become ritualistic, boring, and predictable. And speaking about predictability, a no doubt very astute philosopher once observed, you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. Right? So, preacher, you're wasting your breath. No, I'm not actually. I'm not, for a couple of good reasons. Number one, isn't it great that we are not dogs? And isn't it fantastic that in putting a little bit of enthusiasm into our lives and breaking the mold of predictability, putting zest into our life certainly isn't a trick? So we're off and running. Because you can't teach an old dog new tricks doesn't apply to us. So we need to put this into practice in our everyday life. We need to practice it at work. So maybe starting tomorrow, drive a different way to work. Getting there is half the fun. And yeah, I know, there's so many ways you can get to work. I understand that. And oftentimes you're running late, and so you need to take the shortest route there and everything. Well, maybe leave a little bit earlier. Now that might really alter your attitude, okay? Get up a little bit earlier to leave for work a little bit earlier and everything. Or when you're there, when you're at work, instead of going to the same place you always go for lunch, go somewhere different if you go out to lunch. Or if you have people with you and they say, no, we always go here, try something different off of the menu. Or something, just change things up a little bit. Try out a little praise and compliments on your coworkers or your boss or an employee. A little bit of praise and compliments can go a long way toward making that other person feel good. And when you make someone else feel good, you can't help but feel a little bit better yourself. But why wait? We need to practice it at church. Start tonight. Okay, when you leave the church building, drive home a different way. I know there are only so many ways you can get home, okay? I won't lie to you. I have preached this sermon before when we lived in a house on the back of the church property. There wasn't much we could do to go a different way, but instead we sort of walked around the parking lot or something. I don't know. But the point is, put a little different in stay after services a little bit longer. Talk to someone that you don't know very well, rather than sticking with the old family or friends that you know and talk to all the time. We need to practice it at work. We need to practice it at church. We need to practice it at home. I'm going to suggest something really radical for you. Okay? Husbands and wives, go out on a date tomorrow night. I know, it's Monday. Why would you go out on a date on Monday? It's less crowded, probably. It's a good reason. But just to change things up a little bit, just the two of you. Or if you want to make it a family affair, take a family outing with the kids. Provided your kids aren't old enough to have their own kids, then they can go off by themselves and everything. But don't always do the practical, the sensible. Sometimes it puts new zip into life by doing something on the spur of the moment, something that is exciting and fun and really would bring happiness and joy to your own life or into the life of other people. Several years ago, after a Sunday night service, I had one of the men there approach me and tell me that he and his wife weren't going to be at church on Wednesday night. I said, okay. He said, and we may not be there on next Sunday either. Okay. And he said, and maybe not the next Wednesday night after that. I said, well, are you leaving or what? He said, well, yeah, we've decided that tomorrow morning we're going to take a drive and we don't know where we're going and we don't know when we're going to be back. And I was like, wow, that sounds great. Now, I know some of us have to work for a living still, and so we don't have the freedom to just run off and head for the hills and everything whenever we want to on the spur of the moment, but we need to break out and try new things, or the living that we're working so hard to make may not really be worth living. But breaking out can also be dangerous. We're such extremists, so don't go to extremes, okay? I mean, I don't think that any of you would want to go to California and rent a kayak and row to Hawaii, okay? That's not what I'm talking about here, okay? You don't have to dye your hair or buy a gold chain, nothing like that. A lot of men go through this midlife crisis thing, and they get themselves a motorcycle or a sports car, and they drive it fast. I've been told I can't do that, by the way. I don't mean for you to do something immoral or illegal or contrary to God's will. I mean, remember, God is your friend. God wants the best way. His way is the best way to live, and it's the only way to die. His way will give you all the zest you can handle. Just simply recognize that God, your Father, wants His kids happy. Getting in on all the good stuff. Don't miss out on anything that He wants you to have. Now, I remember hearing about a lady, a preacher preached this sort of a sermon. And she came up to me afterwards and said, well, preacher, I want to thank you because of your sermon. I'm going to leave my husband and go with this other guy from work that I've been seeing on the side. Whoa, what do you mean? You said, well, God wants me to be happy, and I'm not happy married to this guy, and I'll be happier with this. No. Let's pay attention to what's in here. Let's follow His instructions, and that's how you're truly, truly happy. We hear a lot about the straight life or the straight and narrow. We all live there, and at times it gets boring. Voices call us off the straight life. Voices like pleasure or romance or ego. We run off after these things and end up in an awful ruin. But you see, those voices that are seemingly calling us off that straight life actually belong to the straight life. Some people, in the name of adding some zip and zing to their lives, have broken up a marriage, walked out on kids, or turned their back on God. In so doing, they really did turn their lives around, but not exactly like they had hoped. With your face toward God and both hands grabbing life by the horns is the only way to really get all the gusto life offers. It's the only way to have the full or abundant life that Jesus came to give. Remember John 10:10? What I simply mean is to put some spontaneity, some gusto, some zip into your life. Get off that diet of vanilla and get into those super flavors that life offers. Caleb, David, Jeremiah, Jesus, Paul, and other heroes from the Bible did, and you can too. You know, children have this spark. They're born with it. Someone has said that true success is the ability to carry the genius of the child into manhood. We're to grow out of childishness, but never out of childlikeness. Children still have that sense of wonder. We should never lose it. That's why Jesus said, if you want to be part of the kingdom of God, you have to receive it like a child, Luke 18:17. So for your marriage, hug more, hug longer. Praise each other every day. Spend time alone together. It's too needed, too rewarding not to do so. Hug your kids. Listen to their problems and listen to their discoveries. You know, sometimes I get so wrapped up in what I have to do that I miss those important things. There have been times in the past where Rachel or Jamie wanted to tell me something that was important, at least to them. But I was so wrapped up in what I was doing, I said, not now, Daddy's busy. You know, a few weeks later, I asked Rachel to do something, and you'll never guess what she told me. I was thinking that was a long time ago. I think it was just last week. I'm not sure. Anyway, don't miss out on the wonder of childhood, both yours and theirs. So drive home a different way tonight. It may be difficult to do, but notice the trees, the hills, new construction. Notice and wonder. Smell the roses. Write on a piece of paper, I love you, and send it in the lunch with your kids or with your spouse. Hug your kids. Say, I'm sorry. Smile. Go on a picnic. Walk in the woods. Ride a roller coaster sometime. Read Proverbs. Talk to God with your eyes and your heart wide open. These are the types of things that full, abundant life is made up of. And that is the type of life that Jesus calls us to. And I know a lot of times we hear these stories and we hear these sermons like this and we think, yeah, we're going to do it, we're going to do it, we're going to do it, and then nothing ever changes. In fact, it's almost like Felix, I believe, who said to Paul, in such a short time, do you think you can expect me to become a Christian, convince me to become a Christian? Almost persuading him to change his life. That would have not only changed his life, but changed his eternal destiny as well. Don't be like that. Don't be almost persuaded. Be persuaded. Be persuaded to get everything that you can out of life. Legally, morally, and according to what God's Word has to tell us. Because that's what God's will is for you. He doesn't want you to settle for a vanilla life. He wants you to experience all the flavors that His Word tells us about. If you're here tonight and you're subject to the invitation of Jesus, don't almost get there, but be persuaded to make things right between you and God. And if we can help you through a public response, once you come to the front as we stand and sing together.